world surrounded by franchises, reboots, and shared universes. An elite team of podcasters will risk body and soul to investigate the depths of intellectual properties, one multiverse, subgenre, and trend at a time. Who are we? We're the IP Squad. Welcome back to the IP Squad and our ongoing investigation into the Alien and Predator franchises, and now finally, the franchise that they came together to make. I'm John Campbell, my partner for this investigation, Mike Ergoni.
Two great tastes that taste great together, John. You got your peanut butter on my chocolate, and I got my chocolate on your peanut butter.
Yeah, two great tastes that taste great conceivably together.
In theory.
Yeah. Man, this has got to be one of the ultimate, they thought they had a home run here, right?
Here's the thing about, we're talking about 2004's Alien vs. Predator and or AVP, depending on which poster you're looking at.
Yes, yeah. I do like the lazy posters that just say, it's like, do you remember in the 90s when Independence Day became ID4?
Yeah.
Stupid. Don't do that.
Yeah.
This makes more sense than that, but not much more.
This is a film that is all about potential, right?
Oh, yeah.
It is the concept that excites the mind. And even the logo. I dig a lot of things about this movie, John. I think I'm going to be warmer on this movie than you, pardon the pun.
100%. I'm sure you will be, because if you're remotely warm on this movie, you're warmer than me. I'm as cold as it gets. But I will say this is a movie that is still all potential because this movie is just a movie poster. It is one of the great. You saw that we talked about this last week. This poster, that tagline, every nerd is like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah. Yep. And right out of the gate, though. Right out of the gate, though, some of that potential is immediately squandered the moment you hear this movie is PG-13.
That was, yeah. I mean, we were cognizant in the genre fan community at this point, and once that came out, I mean, that I will say that made that. Did you see this in theaters?
Oh yeah.
Oh, see, that was when I was like, back away, not today. No interest at that point.
Well, and here's in the halcyon days of 2004, when you and I were but freshmen in high school, PG-13 let me go see this movie on my own.
Yeah,
that's the thing, right?
That is the thing, and that was, I mean, no question, that was the thinking here, right?
Yeah,
let's open this
100%.
up and get the middle school, high school crowd in here, and this movie made money. Big shock here, mostly in foreign markets.
Well, when you say that, though, you have to kind of explain that caveat, right? Because the way you can explain a movie, especially like a genre action film doing very well overseas, is the fact that it can translate so easily to non-English speaking markets because you don't care what anyone's saying.
And this may be the greatest example of a film where I truly don't care what absolutely anyone is saying.
I think you could almost cut all of the dialogue out of this film and basically have the exact same plot and not really lose anything.
No, because like 90% of this dialogue is people explaining exposition that doesn't matter at all.
But even so right off the bat, we have this ooh, look at this weird pyramid under Antarctic ice.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
just showing people like wide-eyed reacting, pointing at this thing,
Yeah.
if the dialogue was silenced, we'd get it.
Yeah. Absolutely. You wouldn't get the nuanced details, but I think those are a lot of the things that are why the movie, like all the added mythology stuff, I think is really dumb in this movie.
No, here's the thing,
Because
John.
you
That
still get this.
flashback to
Yeah.
like ancient Mayan cultures or whatever
Yeah.
worshiping the predators,
Yeah.
that explains all of that needless
True.
stuff without words.
True. And you still don't need it because what? Um.
Well, look, there is a meme that we all know and love of the ancient aliens guy going
Yeah.
aliens.
Yeah.
And 2004 to like 2009
Yeah.
was the height of that shit.
And so somebody said, let's make a movie out of that meme.
I mean, there's a little bit of that. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of
There's
Paul W.S. Anderson clearly loves him some John Carpenter. Like there's some Thing vibes in here.
That's the thing that's crazy about this movie, right? Is this movie, for being Alien versus Predator, is actually just a hodgepodge of stuff from other sci-fi movies, including Alien and Predator, but also like a ton of other shit. Because, I mean, the ancient alien stuff is done better in Stargate.
Yeah,
Or
100%.
the Fifth
There's a
Element
lot
as
of
well,
Stargate
actually.
in this.
Fifth Element also does that stuff better, too.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's like this movie is just like copy and paste from a bunch of sci-fi franchises, when really all anyone came to see was a predator and an alien throw down.
And we really only get that twice in the film.
Yeah.
Though, admittedly, I love both big, like, drag-out alien predator fights in this movie.
Sure, those are individually cool, but in like total isolation, you can really feel the impetus of this movie. I was thinking about when I was watching this last night, I was thinking about like, they clearly wrote down like, here are the 10 images we have come up with that are rad as hell. Right? And it's like, okay, an alien tail going through a predator's chest. Rad. A predator slicing an alien head in half. Rad. A predator picking up an alien and swinging it by the tail. Rad. But just like, what's the movie around that? Gleep glop bullshit.
But it was always going to be Gleep Glop bullshit because you have to contrive a story in which these two monsters meet each other. This goes back to Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, right?
Oh, it sure.
It's always going to be nonsense that we have to contrive to make the two meet.
It is, but it's crazy that the movie is more Gleep Glop nonsense than it is Alien. Like, it takes, I think I clocked it, it takes a half hour to get to actual predators like on Earth. You have the predators readying themselves in a couple shots. Yeah. It takes like a half hour to get to the predators actually doing anything. And then I think it's almost an hour before they actually face each other, the aliens and the predator. That's a long time to sit around with characters you do not give a shit about.
And I guess that's the big problem at the center of these Monster Mash movies, right? Mm-hmm. Is your POV characters are always going to be inherently second class to what you came to the movie to see.
Right. I mean, well, it's,
and so,
you know, it's the Freddy versus
you're
Jason
getting
thing. Yeah.
At best, you're getting characters with interesting takes on either of the two sides of the Monster Mash.
That would be a good idea. I mean, that's the thing about this movie is like, you're right. There's that inherent problem, but this movie could have at least tried to create some moderately interesting characters.
Perfect example, Godzilla versus Kong a few years back. Mm-hmm. There are two sets of human characters traipsing around in that movie. One have the more Godzilla-centric storyline, and one have the more Kong-centric storyline. And the characters who are actually following Kong around, way more interesting, and that's why they're the only ones who show back up in Godzilla X Kong New Empire.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have complained about those movies having no interesting character development, but my God, those are the most developed characters compared to this thing. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Climbing lady, rich guy, Italian dude, and cannon fodder seems to be what we've got here. Oh, funny Scottish guy, I guess.
Right. The fact that he named one of his kids Scotty bugs the hell out of me, but
yeah. Colin Salmon, who's an actor I like, doing nothing. Just nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, this immediately, everything about this movie feels cheap because this movie is cheap. Like
What was the budget on this thing?
I think 50 is what I saw.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And that's not nothing, but they have to contrive a story that keeps everything contained on a soundstage.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, so there's a lot of compromises, and then when you read the production history of this movie, you really see, because let's roll things back a little bit and start with how this movie came to be, because this is a movie they've been talking about making, as we've talked about, since Predator 2.
Before that, let's
Yeah.
roll this back 15 years to 1989,
Mm-hmm.
when Dark Horse Presents number 34 through 36 are published between November of 1989 and February of 1990.
Right. The idea of bringing these things together started in the comics with the
Mm-hmm.
Mark Verheiden. And man, didn't you love that they tributed Mark Verheiden by naming a random side character Mark Verheiden in this? That really had
Who,
impact.
yeah. The original comic book written by Randy Stradley and Chris Warner did
Yeah.
the art. Um,
Yeah.
and those were two of the big Alien Predator guys. Randy Stradley specifically did a ton of
Well,
Alien
he was
Predator
a
stuff
big,
for
big
Dark
Dark Horse
Horse.
guy. Yeah, he was. I mean,
Yeah,
he was like one of Mike Richardson's best friends. And yeah.
yeah. So that comic book, which I know that our viewers can't necessarily see this because there's
Yeah.
not a video version of
Right.
this,
Yeah, but
but
you're
I've got my
counting.
omnibus of Alien versus Predator
You're
in my
counting as the
hand right now.
omnibus. I did not go back and reread it, but I did read. I've always been a fan of it. Certainly.
The original Alien vs. Predator run holds such an important place in my heart because it is the first comic that I collected the individual floppy issues of.
There
That
you
I
go.
like went out of my way to track down printings of it. And like that comic sparked such joy in my little nerd brain growing up of just like, wait, these two things can fight each other?
Oh
Whoa.
no, I mean it was an early thing. I mean that was how I felt actually as a kid watching Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Not that we're the same age, but like I was a kid watching old monster movies on TV, as were you, but you were leaning more towards the kaiju ones.
Sure. And like, yeah, my entire childhood is Godzilla versus insert
Right,
other
yeah. The
kaiju
the idea
here.
of like, and we talked about, go back into the Meet the Monsters thing, and that's definitely a movie that I saw through rose-colored glasses, because when I went back to Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, you're like, oh, not quite the Battle of Titans I remembered as a kid. That was a throwdown for the ages. It's more two awkward stuntmen in costumes they can't move and swiping at each other. Um,
Yeah.
but still, yeah, the idea of these crossovers, just such a cool idea. And, but at least in earnest in the movies, Predator 2, when they put that skull in the ship, it was sort of a like, hey, this could happen. There was nothing preventing it. They're both Fox properties. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about that with each subsequent sequel that we've talked about. The idea had always been floated before they made Alien 3, before they made Alien Resurrection. What if we did Alien versus Predator? That's got potential. In fact, we remember, I'm sure you do, the 90s video game that came out, right?
Well, here's the thing. There are a few different 90s video games
Okay. Well, at least one
around
of
this.
them I want to bring up.
Which one are you remembering? You're remembering the shooter, I'm guessing.
I think so, yeah. And that's the one that was actually made to be a tie-in with a movie that didn't happen.
Kind of, yeah. So that one was made by Atari and Rebellion
I
Developments,
think that's
and
right,
that
yeah.
was originally developed for the Atari Jaguar in
That
1994.
smash hit that we all had.
um, but that is
I
actually
forgot
even
about the Jag.
predated slightly by a Capcom side-scrolling beat 'em up in 1993, published by Activision in the U.S. That was for the Super Nintendo.
Okay. Brilliant. I mean, yeah, I don't, but anyway, I was just reading about in at least one of these cases. And yes, I think I am talking about the Atari Jaguar one.
Yep.
That the thought was,
That
let's
was the
get
one that was
this.
eventually for the PC. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about sort of similar to in design to Wolfenstein, which I played a shit ton of Wolfenstein in my day. But that was meant to that was started in development to coincide with a movie that was going to come out of this. And then that didn't happen. And basically, they went through any number of permeations for this version, including one that supposedly, and I don't know why, well, I have some idea, that was going to be basically a real, I mean, people who've read the script said it's almost one-to-one the comic book. And the thing about...
To give our listeners a little bit of recap of like what the comic book is. The comic book is nothing like this film other than a couple of like, there are aliens and there are predators and they're fighting each other. There is a woman at the center of it who eventually bonds with a predator, and that's where the similarities
Paul
stand.
W.S. Anderson talks about, we took influence from the comic. You're like, it's no, kind of.
Because the comic book takes place in the far future, more along the lines of like when Alien takes place.
Yes.
So like Weyland-Yutani is all over the galaxy and there are different mega corporations. And so the comic takes place on this like out in the middle of nowhere ranch world.
Yeah.
And our main character is like a corporate bigwig who gets pulled into a situation in which predators are seeding aliens on their ranch world to initiate this great hunt that's sort of similar to what happens in this movie. Aren't they
putting chest bursters inside the weird space cows and stuff?
They're putting them in weird space cows, but then they're getting out and infecting humans as well, because unbeknownst to the predators, a queen gets laid in one of these creatures.
Okay.
And like there's this whole meditation over the 3 issues of like, well, nature can't be slowed down or stopped, and there are things in the universe that we can't control.
Right.
And like that's why everything goes to shit in that book, is because even the predators can't control what they're trying to control.
Which is all great and immediately has infinitely more substance than this movie.
Yeah.
Because this movie isn't a meditation on anything.
It's a meditation on corporate synergy.
Yes, I suppose one could say that. But that's the thing that got me watching this last night, and I hadn't seen this since I rented it from Blockbuster or whatever back then. Just how needlessly complicated, I was saying this before this is, because one of the things I really like about the comic is it's actually it's a fairly simple setup to get aliens and predators in the same place. Roughly so.
I mean, you say that there's a lot of gleep glop in this movie.
Yeah.
There is a lot of gleep glop in the comic as well, just establishing that, like, okay, we're in a futuristic sci-fi world. There's a corporate oligarchy that kind of runs everything, and there are these people on this backwater planet that are ranching space cows. And then the predators get involved in that.
The thing I would say there is that uses a lot of gleep glop that's already existent in the franchise. This movie is bending over backwards to introduce a bunch of new gleep glop rather than just taking the predetermined a lot of the lore from the Predator and Alien movies, and including adding things that I'm just like, I mean, the presence of Lance Henriksen in this movie, which I'll never complain about. I love Lance Henriksen. But what?
The idea that, like, okay, this is a time. A, it takes place in 2004. B, it's
by the way,
okay. Here's Weyland industry that's not yet Weyland-Yutani.
We should just say every decision we're laying out for this movie was a studio going, that comic sounds expensive. Did you say future? Did you say space world? Get that shit out of here. Today, right. Even if now, Earth.
Even if the space world is just Arizona in the 1800s, because that's effectively what it is.
That's what I thought. I thought the presentation of the planet in that book really wouldn't be expensive. You're basically, just go out to Monument Valley or whatever. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, my God, it wouldn't be that expensive. But no, they're like, no, we can build a one set in Bulgaria. Because I love somebody going like, why did you shoot this in, where did they shoot this? I don't know if it was actually Bulgaria. But and
I think it's Czechoslovakia.
Yes, it's the Czech Republic, exactly. They filmed in Prague, and he was just like, "Oh, because it's like a tenth the cost." And you're like, "Oh, that's great. That's great." Yeah. What I like is for this being like, "Hey, we're going to take 2 of our marquee franchises and put them together, but we're not really going to spend a lot of money on it." That's a great attitude, Fox.
Well, I mean, look, early 2000s Fox, what do they got going on? Like, this is just after the or actually no, they're in the middle of like the prequel trilogy getting released, right?
But you got to keep in mind that's in conjunction with Lucasfilm, primarily owned by Lucasfilm. They're basically just the distributors.
Sure, but they're making basically free money on that.
I mean, you've got that right. Yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting that they're just like they just kind of toss this out. They had a number of I remember a lot of 20th Century Fox um like franchise non-starters, which is still a season I want to do at some point.
Sure, but they've also got like the X-Men going on right
That's
now
right.
and
That's
all
big for them. Yeah.
busters.
Yeah. X-Men. Yeah, I'm looking at what they've got. Oh yeah. But once again, they've got the X-Men, but I'm also looking at a lot of the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes.
Mm.
Um,
Didn't
that
that movie do well though?
I think it did okay. How about the From Hell adaptation with Johnny Depp?
Oh, yeah, that exists.
Minority Report was big. I mean, I don't know. They're hit and miss. Well, they started the Transporter franchise. That was, I mean, so I mean, they're coming and go, but it's just so interesting. That's like finally the Alien versus. But I will say immediately, looking at this cast, you can feel the. Well, hiring Paul W.S. Anderson immediately says to me, we're B tier. All right. No offense to the guy, but that's a name certainly now when we look back on it, right? If I see his name, I'm going automatically lower expectations.
Are you telling me that the director of that weird Death Race remake is a B tier director?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was always just kind of like, he's one step above the straight to video stuff.
How dare you slander the director of Monster Hunter, starring his wife, Mila Jovovich?
I mean, that's the biggest surprise. We were talking about this just beforehand. The biggest surprise of this movie is that Mila Jovovich is not the main character. I am
Were they together at this point?
Yes, I don't know if they were married, but I mean, they got together on the first Resident Evil, which he has already made at this point. So,
okay.
Yeah. And basically, aside from this and the aforementioned Death Race remake, I think she's been in every film he's directed since.
Look, they've made a beautiful relationship together, going to exotic places on studio dimes and making movies together.
It does kind of feel that way. It's also, he's one of those directors who's like, do his movies make money? Because they just keep giving him more money to make movies. Because he and Mila Jovovich have a new movie coming out next year called In the Lost Lands.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah, and it's I mean, get this, she plays some sort of warrior badass in a genre setting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, just...
let's see. They've been together, or at least they've been married since 2009.
Okay, yeah. But I think they got together on the first... I don't know, though. Look, the last thing I could ever care about is the relationship of Paul W.S. Anderson and Mila Jovovich.
That's fair.
I did not...
Oh, she was married to Luc Besson? I didn't know
Oh,
that.
yeah. That was during Fifth Element, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But anyway... yeah, but I will just say, look at the cast of this movie, and you can feel something we talked about, like even like Alien Resurrection. Everyone in that was like solid pros. Here, all these people are working actors, but I don't think I've ever seen a movie where it's not, hey, that guy. It truly is like, who is that guy? Do I know this guy?
It is a bunch of working European actors specifically. So you may have seen them in something that was maybe on the BBC or something that was made overseas and then imported by Netflix. So like these are recognizable people, but only recognizable to people who also watch a lot of like B genre grade television.
They're
and
people,
movies.
but they're people. I'm sure you had the same reaction I did because we are those people. But but it's a lot of, I don't know what I know this guy from, but that face is familiar.
Yeah, like I think Ewan Bremer is maybe the best. Or Bremner is maybe the best example of that. The guy who plays the Scottish fellow in this movie, who is named Graham Miller. Why they spell it in the credits, how it's phonetically said, as opposed to just writing it as Graham, and then the Scottish would pronounce it Graham.
I don't know.
Anyway, he's also a Scotsman in Wonder Woman.
Yep. And if you're a fan of 90s indie cinema, he played Spud in Trainspotting, which was
he's probably most recognizable these days as Buttons from Our Flag Means Death.
Yeah, I mean, once again, none of these people are like, amateurs, but also it's a distinct, we're going down. This does not have Ron Perlman, Dan Hedaya, Leland Orser from Resurrection, where you're like, oh, these are guys where you're I mean, like, I know Tommy Flanagan from Sons of Anarchy.
Sure, and you'd probably recognize Colin Salmon. You mentioned him as
Yeah.
like, oh, that guy.
I mean, I know him from the Bond franchise, but that's me.
Sure.
But yeah, like, he's in Punisher Warzone. He was also in Resident Evil for Paul W.S. Anderson. He was just in the Bob Odenkirk movie Nobody. He's around. Solid. But like, Hendrickson is the biggest name here. And at least Sanaa Lathan is up and coming. She's a very good actress. Not that it matters for this movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to. What have I seen her in since this? And the answer is not much.
I mean,
she keeps working. She's been in a ton of stuff. I probably recognize her voice as Catwoman in the Harley Quinn animated show.
Sure, yeah. I mean, but like she was on Succession. She was on the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. She does the voice of Cleveland's wife on Family Guy and the Cleveland Show, which is a big ongoing gig. But yeah, she's certainly around. But it's like, by the way, don't watch this. Go watch Out of Time with her and Denzel Washington. A really underrated little gem of a thriller. She got a lot of praise, and I think what got her the attention of this movie, she got a lot of praise for a movie called Love and Basketball, which was a very well received indie drama. It's a really good movie. I mean, that's the thing is actually
she was in the original Blade.
She's Blade's mom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's only a couple scenes, but she's really the thing about this is she's a really, really good dramatic actress, which is a weird choice for them. I mean, like, because what is her character in this movie?
Her character is ice expert.
I know, and it's just automatically there's so many weird choices out the gate. You're like, yeah, she's an ice climber. Not a former spec ops, not the kind of character you would expect to be the main character of this thing.
But that's fine, because that goes back to the roots of Alien. Like, you can have somebody who has a more mundane be our central hero or protagonist. But the fact that they have this built-in backstory of how she lost her dad to the ice. And like,
yeah, it's the most dramatic piece of acting she gets to do.
Right. But they build this whole like, oh, I lost my dad, I'm not going to lose Lance Henriksen, Mr. Wayland. Like, there's this surrogate father relationship that is almost a thing in this movie, but they don't lean into it.
Well, also because, spoilers, I guess, Lance Henriksen dies unceremoniously about halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
So what was the point of setting that up then? And also, why would she have that? He seems like a piece of shit.
I don't have a read on Charles Wayland, the character he plays in this movie.
I will say, though, well, I think maybe some of it is just the second you call the guy Wayland, I'm like, well, they're the bad guys of Aliens. I mean,
yeah, and especially like the last time we saw him in this franchise, he was trying to convince Ripley not to kill herself at the end of Alien 3.
He was literally the face of the corporate enemy last time we saw him.
Yeah.
A corrupted vision of our friend Bishop.
Reading some of the production notes here, specifically on Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But the idea there was that, like, okay, going forward, when Weyland-Yutani starts making androids, they would make one in the face of one of the founders of the company.
Yeah.
But then, look, try to justify this character against, what's his name from Prometheus? And,
the Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce's role. Yeah. And, like, logic, you have to throw it out the window.
Yeah, I think he's Peter Weyland. And actually very similar to this, if you remember in that movie, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks. He also is old and dying and going on the mission.
Right.
Because that's one of the weirdest choices in that movie, that they cast a young guy and put him in old age makeup. There's a lot of weird stuff about Prometheus. That's going to be a whole conversation. But anyway, it's
right. And there's some notes here about how, like, in one of the many phases of development of this movie, they did go to Ridley Scott, and like he had a bunch of ideas that he had generated, but those all eventually became Prometheus.
We've talked about this since Alien 3 when they came to him. He's been going like, I want to tell the origin of this species. That's been his big obsession. And I think that's a bad call. I don't care. And I think time has indicated that.
I mean, look, I'm glad he got it out of his system.
Yeah, I mean, at least he can move on to other stuff. But I just like that every time they came to, he's like, "You guys ready to make that prequel? No, Ridley out." It's just so weird that was his obsession. There was also, I'm sure you saw in the production notes, at least a treatment of some kind by James Cameron for a fifth Alien film.
Yeah,
I don't know what that would have been.
That was probably like notes scrawled on the back of a napkin, right?
But as soon as they said we're actually looking into Alien versus Predator, he was like, "That's a stupid idea." I will say, almost everyone involved in the original franchises for each of these movies was like, "That's a dumb idea to do Alien versus Predator. That way lies destruction."
Well, because on paper, you're talking about a monster mash, right? Like
Yeah.
that was how the Universal Monster franchise like petered out, was just them trying to like mash it up an infinite number of permutations until eventually we got to Abbott and Costello. Admittedly, the best of the bunch, but
crazy. That's the best Monster Rally movie by far. It's insane.
I know.
But I mean, Cameron says that. There's a quote from him on the Wikipedia that he was like, as soon as they said that, all I could picture was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, which was, yes, the dying breath of those where they're like, oh, they don't like these things individually anymore? Together? And I will say,
to the point where there's even a brief cut to a black and white TV with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman footage at the start of this movie. So they're calling their shot Beirut style.
Go back once again, and but like if you go back to our Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters episode where we talk about the history of that movie literally started as the joke. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. And this, in some ways, I mean, I think you could make a good Alien versus Predator movie, but it does seem like the way a lot of this stuff has gone is these really, really work as comic books. Because now it's a whole subgenre of comic, basically, is the mashup thing.
Well, that's the one big issue I have with this approach to the movie, was that we have an example of the story being told in an earnest fashion.
Yeah.
And that's what this movie is missing in a lot of ways, is earnestness, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I look, once again, especially at a certain point, there is no earnestness in any Paul W.S. Anderson movie. I'm sorry to say.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry to say it. We will. I'll say, make sure you're a patron if you want to hear me say nice things about him, because we are talking about his movie Event Horizon on.
I was gonna say.
No, that's why I said after a certain point. That was like the last time I thought like, oh shit, this guy's got like a vision of something, and then it's just been hack crap from there on after.
Say what you will about that first Mortal Kombat movie, it is earnest.
Oh, it is aggressively earnest. And we will say what we will about it on our upcoming video game movie season. I even kind of like Soldier, the movie he made with Kurt Russell. That at least still feels like, I mean, it's an original concept. Because, I mean, also at a certain point, I think after Soldier, he never again makes an original property.
Let's see. Resident Evil, Death Race, Resident Evil, Death Race, Resident Evil, Death Race, Resident Evil. Yep. Monster Hunter.
Yeah. I think Pompeii is as close as he gets to that, where he tried to make a giant
what
disaster
if there was a
movie.
volcano?
Yeah, he tried to do a historical epic meets disaster movie.
And that was when Kit Harington like really got pigeonholed into, you are medieval boy now.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't have to be Game of Thrones, but you need to be a guy in armor with a sword, at least in some capacity. Pompeii is
and never again movie. Shall you be allowed to be anything else.
Yeah, it's a super dumb movie, but like his 3D Three Musketeers movie, the aforementioned.
Oh boy, I remember that with the sword coming right at the screen.
Yeah. Finally, sword fights where you feel like you might get stabbed. And of course, that's more. Look, there's going to be a lot of Paul W.S. Anderson on the show, because we will definitely do a Three Musketeers IP Squad season. There's so many Three Musketeers movies. It's insane.
He's doing a House of the Dead movie? Well, that could be fun.
Well, isn't that just him finding a way to kind of get back to Resident Evil?
I'm looking at his list of credits now. I'm realizing I don't think I ever watched the last 2 Resident Evil movies.
Oh, it may be more than I don't know how many I've seen of the Resident Evil movies. And once again, there'll be a Resident Evil season. We're not doing that for video game movies because there's too many. He made 6,
Right.
which is insane.
And then there's Welcome to Raccoon City.
Yeah.
And would you include the animated films as well?
Maybe those might be the patron episodes though. Yeah, but so no, there's 7 movies right there though. And then they also did that Netflix show too.
Oh right.
Yeah, that just came and went without. I mean, that thing doesn't exist basically.
I completely forgot that happened.
Yeah, I never. Did you watch any of it? I didn't watch any of it. I heard
no.
it was just kind of nothing.
I remember it coming out, and then like life kept happening and other shows kept happening, so I just always put it off, and then never watched it.
I think I had a similar thing where it's not like I avoided it as much. I was just like, all right, yeah, there's a Resident Evil show until I forgot there was a Resident Evil show. So this movie, there's just here's my big thing about this movie in my rewatch, because I remember not liking it, but rewatching it last night, I was really struck by one thing that I think is just fatally wrong. This movie's boring. I found a lot of this movie very, very boring.
So I want to quickly just breeze through the plot of this movie, because there's not a lot when you cut out the filler, right?
No, yeah, there's a lot of exposition, but weirdly little plot.
I'll give it to us in bullet points here, so we can just talk at the movie at large if we get this out of the way.
Yeah.
So, team is assembled because Wayland Industries has discovered a pyramid under the ice of Antarctica.
Yes.
Team is made up of quote unquote experts in a bunch of different fields, including our main character, Alexa Woods, who is an ice expert.
Yeah. We know this because we meet her climbing a glacier.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will say I really do like the cut of her on the phone with the assistant guy, and then swoop pan up to his feet at the top of the ice cliff. I don't have a week.
That's a mildly fun moment that they basically stole from Mission Impossible.
Correct.
Because they got to steal shit. All right.
So they go down to Antarctica. Yeah. They find that there is an abandoned whaling village here that was been abandoned for 100 years. It was a big mystery.
Wow.
Meanwhile, in space, we see a spaceship approaching. It's the Predators.
Spoiler, it's the Predators. Never saw
their masks.
I never saw that coming.
Humans, of course, fucking around and finding out. They go down into this village. It's spooky as all get out. We're getting some Big Thing vibes. We're getting some big At the Mountains of Madness vibes.
Yeah.
That is when laser blast from the sky carves a hole straight down through the ice. Remember all those drillers we brought to carve through the ice? They're just cannon fodder now, because we already got us a tunnel into the ice.
There is this might be the most egregious use of cannon fodder in either film franchise.
Look, we needed to cram this movie to the gills with people whose names we don't know, so that we can get more aliens, because that's how those work.
Yep.
So all the humans, named ones and not, climb down this tunnel to the ancient ruins. What's this pyramid down there? Whoa, it's all these ancient cultures blended into one pyramid. Maybe this is the first pyramid. Turns out Predators taught ancient humans how to build stuff. Ancient aliens, guy with big hair, hands to the side. Aliens. Whoa.
Yeah.
Lance Henriksen is Mr. Wayland. He is old. He is sick. He is climbing down this ice for reasons. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that I thought was key. Actually, it makes more sense in Prometheus, which is the last time.
They dance around it in this movie. His goal seems to be I know I'm dying. I need to do one last great thing before I die and go out on top.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Whereas in Prometheus, it's I want to be immortal.
Yeah.
Also good.
Yeah.
Humans go down there, trigger the pyramid to start activating. Pyramid is actually a big hunting ground for Predator rite of passage, in which they must enter this pyramid and fight aliens. That happens. That's the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Then the rest of the movie, like all of these, it descends into everyone runs around while the alien. The only difference here is mostly while the alien and Predator fight each other, and the characters are sort of caught up in it.
And they're all picked off one by one. The only person to survive is Alexa Woods, our ice expert, who befriends one of the predators halfway through the running around sequence by giving the predator his gun back. And then the predator teaches her the ways of the hunt by strapping an alien head to her arm, which admittedly looks rad.
Now,
But
once again, there's a lot of rad images in this movie.
But again, everything rad in this movie lifted directly from another source.
Yeah.
That stuff is straight from the comics.
But that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what you should be lifting from. Why you need the ancient aliens and thing stuff? That's where I'm like, what? I mean, it's just
eventually
lazy.
All the predators are picked off. All the humans are picked off. One predator, one human, Alexa, and this other predator. They have run away from a bomb moment. Then Alien Queen gets out. Alien Queen chases them to the surface. Last dramatic fight. They chain the Alien Queen to a big heavy thing, drop her in the ocean. Is that going to stop the Alien Queen? Of course not. They can survive in space. Why would we think that would be successful? Anyway, the movie doesn't address that.
No.
And then at the end of the movie, last predator dies. Bunch of other predators show up, a la the end of Predator 2. Mark of respect left on surviving ice expert.
Yeah, it's the exact same ending.
Yeah. To the point where even like big scary predator guy with cape hands ice expert a spear saying, "You done good, kid."
Yep.
And then gives her a thumbs up and returns to his planet.
Yeah.
But then, what's this? Last predator who died gets back to the predator ship, and he got a passenger in his chest cavity.
I fucking hated that so much. And not only, it's a hybrid?
The Predalien, yes.
Which doesn't make any sense, because that's not normally how this works.
Don't worry about it, John. We have a whole other movie to complain about that. The Predalien, I will say, also originates from the comics.
Yeah, sure.
Not the specific original comic run, but there's been a lot of Alien vs. Predator comics, and I think the one from 1990, I think it's called Duel, was the one that originally introduced the Predalien.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because at a certain point, I definitely have a lot of fondness for the original run, and then I've read a smattering of them, but I can't say I've kept up on all the Alien vs. Predator stuff.
It's a lot.
I've read some. I've certainly read when it's crossed over, like I did read Superman and Batman versus Predator. I mean, I have all those collections of the DC Predator Alien crossovers.
One of my favorites is Alien vs. Predator versus Terminator.
Yeah, that's good. I also read...
Because that's like weirdly a sequel to Alien Resurrection, because Ripley's like the main character.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question that was had about this, because you saw the thing about there was almost a Schwarzenegger cameo. I do wonder, would the presence of...
I love that story. The Schwarzenegger cameo was contingent on him winning or losing his gubernatorial, what was it, special election?
Yeah. If I don't win the election, they'll do the Alien and Predator. I won the election. Sorry, guys.
I'm busy being the governor.
I have to be the governor and save California. I will say, from what I gathered, not a terrible governor for the state, but never learned how to pronounce the name of the state. California.
Well, I have heard stories about how he can like turn up and down the accent depending on how folksy he wants to be.
Absolutely, because logically, I heard somebody say this once. He's been in this country for over 50 years, and he hasn't lost a shred of that accent, which just seems impossible, which means he must be doing something to keep it because he knows it's a signature thing, right?
That's probably part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I just like the idea of him working with a dialect.
What would the Dutch cameo in this be?
Yeah, I don't know. I know what when we get to the Predator, I do know what that was supposed to be, and I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know where that would have been. Would it have been like? Do you think it would have been at the beginning? Do you think Waylon would have contacted him? He would be like, "Go fuck yourself,"
or is it
like a Wolverine kind of thing?
Ice expert is left on the ice. Helicopter comes down.
Yeah.
Dutch gets out and goes, "Hey kid, looking good. Come with me."
Well, there was also a brief discussion about bringing Danny Glover back into this movie too.
That makes about as much sense as anything else.
I mean, I will say actually the plot would make but they don't. Here's the thing, because I was gonna say it would make sense to get like, what if Waylon had gone going, "You've seen these things," but they don't know that stuff is there, and the Predator why do the Predators come here?
Okay, so this movie would maybe make more sense if Waylon did know something was up with this pyramid,
I was
though that
waiting
is
for
revealed
that.
not to be the case.
I was waiting for that, weren't you? Like, that seems like the obvious screenwriter thing is like, wait. I mean, then that's all these movies have that. The first Predator, they all have this, right? Where it's like, wait, you know more than this was a death trap.
Right. And the idea that like maybe Waylon knew there was like alien technology here and he wanted to get
But
his
not
hands
only
on
is
it.
that like an obvious thing that would give like a turn to the movie, it also would make a lot of the movie make more sense.
Right, like why do we have all these people with guns here?
When Colin Salmon, when they're just when Sanaa Lathan's character is like, we got to get out of here, and Colin Salmon just like loads. By the way, he does something I hate, and this, if you're an Action Shelf listener, or if you missed the Action Shelf, welcome to John's Gun Corner briefly again. This is a small one, but he twice racks the slide of his rifle
Without firing it.
Right. So the second one would have just ejected a bullet.
Yes.
But they're just, it's a thing that drives me insane because they just think it's cool for people to do that. You're like, you understand that's a mechanism that has a specific purpose, right? Like,
but John, clicking sounds are cool.
Clicking sounds are cool. I mean, look, I'm always also up for more reloading in movies because it's cool. But
yeah.
But no, yeah, when they do that, I was just like, wait, what? What do they think they're gonna shoot? If they don't
the
know
fact
this
that they're
stuff
carrying suitcases with them, then they just like hit a button, the suitcase sides fall off, and they're just guns. That's so funny to me.
That's cool. I think
in a John Wick movie, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think I've actually seen that in some other movies, like maybe in a John Woo movie, where suddenly it just becomes. But like here you're just like, what? But it is like what do they think they're gonna shoot? And then suddenly also. The amount of everybody's sidearm in this movie is the Desert Eagle, which makes me laugh too. The most impractical, overpowered gun ever created, in my opinion.
But to answer your question about like what's actually happening in this movie, So, I won't go super deep on this. But
okay. Can you? Could you go super deep on this?
Yeah.
There's depth here.
I won't, like a shallow but I could.
Pond. All right, go ahead.
Ancient aliens. Whoa.
Yes, I got that.
Predators come here every 100 years to go through this rite of passage at this pyramid.
Right.
It has been 100 years since the last time it happened.
Oh,
and the last time it happened, it wiped out everybody in that whaling village.
So what you're saying is, in great screenwriting fashion, total coincidence.
That these people are here on the exact date? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, because they sense the heat pulse like triggering.
Oh.
So like they knew something was happening and that's what drew them in.
And the Predator goal was to unfreeze the aliens, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so they purposely kept aliens frozen, which once again, cool images. The aliens unfreezing and like coming back to life, cool. Like everything with them looks cool.
Would have been if no humans had shown up to this, what would the Predators have done? Because there would be no one to implant embryos into. There would be no aliens to hunt.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. They really lucked out on that one. And also it's the thing I was thinking about too was at the end of the movie the Predator kind of ends up being the hero.
Well, look, thankfully, before the bomb goes off, our ice expert really doesn't have time to process that the Predators killed everybody left at camp on their way down into the ice tunnel.
Right.
So these Predators, not good folks.
No, and also they just created this whole circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. But there was this whole turn in the film where she's like, enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'd rather stick with the guys who seem to be people-ish as opposed to the black-eyed.
You know what I love about a movie? You know what I love in a movie? Just stating the subtext. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Hello.
Yeah, what if we chant that
hello,
over and over again?
My friend. Fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, look, she's saying that like the frickin' litany against fear in June.
Get out of here. Yeah, but that's rad. that's rad writing. I mean, I finally wore it out, but for years I had a "Fear is the Mind Killer" shirt because, like, that actually I think is good advice. But yeah, this is just nonsense. I mean that, uh, but like, yeah, oh, man, the people that go down here though. I
Mhm.
mean, the fact you talk about some of them have even the people who have names. I don't know most of their names, other than the Mark.
I
I caught the
know.
Mark Verheiden, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, and that's Tommy Flanagan, who is another one of those who you'd be
Oh
like,
yeah,
"Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that guy."
Tommy Flanagan is. I mean, I mean, he's a great character actor, but it's not a good deal if he's actually one of the most recognizable actors in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize him definitely as Cicero from Gladiator the most.
Yep.
He's also in like every episode of Sons of
I
Anarchy,
was just gonna say. I
obviously.
mean, he's Chibs from Sons of Anarchy to me, of course.
Yeah,
And he was like my favorite character in Sons of Anarchy. He ruled on there. So, you also might remember him. He has a very fun role in a movie. We have a lot of affection for Smoking Aces. He is the
oh
master
yes.
of disguise assassin in that movie, and he rules in that
Uh-huh.
movie. Braveheart was his big breakout too. He's sort of the like Mel Gibson
Totally.
right hand man in that. He was also one of the Ravagers and Guardians. I mean, he's a well known character actor. They do put him in a god awful blonde wig for reasons I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't
Like a
know. I
floppy
mean,
haired. I don't understand that.
half of his thing is he's got some very recognizable facial
Yeah,
scars, and
which is a huge
like
part of
that's
his
kind of
character's backstory on Sons of Anarchy. You should see
yeah.
it.
Uh, but yeah, why they choose to draw attention away from that and give him this like weird ass blonde wig, I don't know.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit anything about his. It stands out so much because you're like, that is not that guy's hair. Nothing about this guy's coloring or anything leads me to think that would be his natural hair.
Ultimately, he's just yet another
No,
cannon fodder.
the only reason I remember was because I know the actor, but the character is nothing. None of the
Yeah.
characters are anything. Even Italian guy who's hunky, Raul Bova, who plays Sebastian De Rosa.
Who is an Italian archaeologist who's like a pyramid expert.
Yeah, even he only makes an impression because number one, he's Italian, and number two, he lives longer than most of the characters.
Yeah, and he's got a lucky Pepsi cap.
Yeah. Oh, Pepsi paid a lot of money for that too.
Which, why? So we see him in his first scene find that Pepsi cap
Yeah.
in the like dig site he's at.
Yeah.
And then he suddenly is wearing it as a necklace. It
Yeah.
seems like it should be a more long-term, like, oh, on my first dig, I thought I was going into a burial chamber, and then all I found was garbage.
Yeah, instead he's like, hey, like a week ago, I found this cap.
Right.
I know, look kind of cool.
It's a metaphor, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ask me for what?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Once again, just nothing. And then he gets this death where there's a chest burster in him, and here's a problem immediately: the Predator can't talk, so you have to do a lot of things where like he's indicating stuff or whatever. And I mean, I'm not. There's a way you could get around it. It's just very clumsily handled in this movie. Maybe a better writer could figure this out. But like
the way you get around it is having lines you introduce early in the film that the Predator can then repeat. That's like a Predator thing that's never used in this movie.
Very famously used in all of the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Because he basically has to be like you have the classic scene of, I don't want to kill this guy, even though, I don't know, who fucking knows this guy. But she doesn't want to shoot the Italian guy, even though he gets a chest burster in him. And basically, you have to have, without dialogue, the Predator be like, no, man, listen, you got to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But I also thought, like, this Predator doesn't have human emotions as we understand them. Wouldn't he just... Why would he be like, no, you got to do it?
It seems like, again, a better movie would have done this better, but like the basic subtext of Ice Expert's relationship, I don't know the character's name.
I mean,
Alexa.
Yeah. Why would you? Why would you know anyone's name in this movie? They don't care.
The premise of their relationship seems to be like knight and squire kind of a thing going on.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like a blooding situation where the Predator is just like, you got to pull the trigger. This is something that you, as my squire, have to learn how to do.
Yeah. But that, like, you're having to infer a lot from.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, I'm going, because as you're saying that, I'm going, like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going, like, but there's really nothing in the movie that says that. It's just like.
The only thing that's giving me Squire vibes is the fact that the first thing the Predator gives her is a shield and spear.
Which, once again, are rad as hell because the shield is an alien head and the spear is made from the tail of the alien, which is cool as hell.
Right. And there's this whole demonstration the Predator gives, which is like, the acid blood doesn't work on alien stuff.
Okay.
That's why we're doing this.
That is the best moment that they do of the Predator communicating without words. That, fine. Actually using visual language, and you're going like, oh, this thing is smart enough to know how to communicate to her.
Well, and the whole, like, my wrist thing, it's a bomb.
That also is fine. Although, this movie did teach me, I don't want to see a Predator run. It looks dumb as hell when it was running for that long. That costume and that thing to.
Well, you can't have the headpiece fall off, so he can't really move his torso.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's like, his back is ramrod straight, and his little legs are pumping. And you're just like, oh, this looks so silly. It just and also it doesn't help that like everything. This movie feels so stage bound. I never felt like we were actually in an old temple. I felt like we were on a sound stage for a lot of it. And not that like the production design.
You were.
Yeah, not that the production design is bad, but you really just get there is such a feeling of, oh, you guys didn't have money, did you?
Well, look, was it a dead giveaway when we have a temple that quote unquote reconfigures itself so that we can just turn the camera around and use a different angle on sets?
Oh my God. Every time they use that thing where the hallway is like mirrored, I'm like, this doesn't look as cool as you think it does. This looks very silly. No, that's the thing about this movie. It's just so lazy in places. It's so needlessly complicated, but then also just super lazy. It sets up all this stuff, but it doesn't really have any interest in paying any of it off.
Yeah, and like there's the whole thing with the first alien that we encounter that gets like the net marks burned into its head, and we sort of get the implication that this one's smarter than all the other ones, but we don't know why or to what end.
Like I said, it feels like they just went in with a bunch of ideas and then had to kind of string a movie together. And some of those, I gotta say, like one of the things that I just remembered, the movie opens with like NASA or some kind of satellite monitoring thing.
It's Wayland Industries.
Yeah, I guess that's the idea. But just the idea about like it felt like a needless cutaway, just be like, something's out there.
Well, and it starts the trend that this movie is guilty as sin about, which is the huge overuse of ADR.
Oh, because they were fixing this thing across the board, right? They were filling in exposition in editing.
For those who don't know, ADR is dialogue replacement.
Automatic dialogue replacement, yeah.
Right. So, like, you're not using the sound that you captured on the day of. You're going back later and having either the actors, hopefully, or whole new people replacing the dialogue of characters speaking.
And
you can really tell the difference in this movie.
Well, because a lot of the time you're doing it because, like, oh, we didn't have that line. This movie reeks of we were changing stuff after the fact. Because sometimes you have to do that where it's like, okay, now that we figured this out in post, we now need something that sets it up. So oftentimes you look for a shot either that's like way out wide or the camera's behind somebody and they put it in the ADR. Or my favorite, so many movies do, just a car driving, and it's like, hold on, are you telling me that we're driving to the home of the killer right now?
Yeah, having wide shots where you're not actually seeing any face delivered dialogue, and yet that is when the dialogue is being delivered, is a sure sign that they added that later.
And like I said, most of the dialogue in this movie is exposition. There is so much explaining of shit. That we mentioned the Italian archaeologist guy. He has to do the whole thing about like, okay, here's the deal. See, the predators, they came thousands of years ago and were worshipped as gods, which I gotta say, and look, canons, whatever, out the window. That feels weird to me in jiving with the original movie. I don't know. I mean, What was that Predator doing then? If they come back every 100 years, and what was City Predator doing?
Oh, great question. No, you're absolutely correct. Like
Yeah,
it with this canon as it presents
that's
in
what
this
I'm
movie,
saying. Yeah,
the first two Predator movies stop making
that's
sense.
what I'm saying. So it's like I don't understand, but yet this guy, but Paul W.S. Anderson is like, oh, but I wanted to make sure we got Wayland in there so that it ties in with the franchises. You're like, yeah, but then other stuff, you're like, you're actively, I have no idea. And then if you try to connect, once again, this movie's not canon at all. Nobody's gonna, because Prometheus will undo this, obviously. I think, basically, right?
Well, here's the problem that
Yeah,
we run into with this franchise, and a problem we're going to run into from here on out
yeah,
is we now have three separate franchises going back and forth on whether or not they acknowledge each other.
right,
Because we have an Alien franchise, a Predator franchise, and an Alien versus Predator franchise.
right,
Now, admittedly, we're only going to get two Alien vs. Predator movies
right.
going forward, but there will be Predator movies that acknowledge Alien vs. Predator stuff. None of the Alien movies will really acknowledge Alien
No,
vs. Predator stuff,
no.
and Alien vs. Predator stuff will try to acknowledge Prometheus and Predator stuff. Whew.
Yeah. And now we're getting this Alien show where the showrunner has said he's ignoring everything in Prometheus and not Romulus, Covenant.
Yeah, and look, maybe that's because it's set on Earth and it's possibly like a prequel to everything, so it'd be pretty easy to ignore a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think his quote was, "I don't need it."
and that's fair because like from everything you've told me about what that show's supposed
Yeah.
to be about and everything I've read, it's more about like corporate intrigue and
Yeah.
android stuff
Yeah.
and Wayland-Yutani being shitty as all get
We're
out.
gonna get more into the beginnings of the super corporation villain in it, which that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean continuity in this. But I'm just saying. But once again, if you're coming to this as a fan, I think that's the big thing to me. Is like one of the things I like about the comic is it kind of. I mean, it doesn't not involve. Obviously, there is like Wayland-Yutani stuff in it, but there's not the
Vaguely.
yeah. But
Like the
there's
big corporation we're dealing with in that comic specifically is actually a whole different thing.
oh
There's a reference to Wayland
okay.
Yutani in that book when they're like finally trying to figure out what's going on. They're like, oh, we have the records from the Nostromo. This is what they learned from that, but
Okay.
we could only get that under great
See, that's
duress.
the kind of cool to put in the Easter egg stuff. The idea that they're like that this movie gets so lost in the mythology and lore of the Predator and Alien. I don't need that. Just give me. I mean, like this should be rock'em sock'em intense. These things are fighting. We're trying to survive. Like I said, I think the comic does a good job of giving you enough of a setup to explain why these two things are here and why our characters are caught in the middle, and then we're off to the races.
Well, here's the problem, John, is you're going to get exactly what you're asking for in Alien vs. Predator Requiem,
No,
and it's still not great.
no, it's an overcorrection, and I distinctly remember that because the Alien versus Predator Requiem reads like, "Hey, we read the forums, okay? We got the notes." And then you're like, yeah, but no, you're still failing for a different reason now. Yeah, no, absolutely, that's the case. By the way, I think we both watched this streaming, right? Did you own this movie?
No, I watched it on Disney Plus this
Okay,
morning.
yeah. So did I.
Well, technically Hulu, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're the same thing. It's so weird. But because there is an unrated cut of this movie.
Yes, I own that on DVD.
Yeah, I thought you might, but I bring that up only because the unrated cut is so funny to me because this movie was always made to be a PG-13. That they went back after the fact due to complaints and R-rated it up after the fact. So they added a bunch of CG blood that was never meant to be there necessarily to do
So it
the
looks bad.
unrated cut.
Yeah.
It's not like I always bring up the fourth Die Hard movie, where they made an R-rated movie, or the Wolverine is the case with this.
Yep.
These were
totally.
R-rated movies that they cut down to PG-13 and then released unrated cuts that were returning all the violence that they had taken out. Here they started adding violence, and I've never seen that, but I have to imagine that looks really stupid.
It's not great, and also something people have to understand about when a thing advertises itself as unrated,
Yeah,
that simply means they haven't resubmitted it to the MPAA
yeah,
for a rating.
yeah,
That does not necessarily mean that anything of significance has been actually added to the film. You could add 2 seconds to a
yeah.
film, not resubmit it to the MPAA, and now it's suddenly an unrated version.
They did that so much with like comedies in the 2000s, remember, like early 2000s, like it's old
Oh,
school, unrated and out of control, and you're like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a couple Vince Vaughn improvs that weren't in the movie, but now it's oh, you gotta see it, man. Oh
Yeah.
boy, you know.
So like the unrated version of AB isn't going to change the fact that every single time we see the predator stab some motherfucker with his claws,
Yeah,
we never see it going out the other side.
no.
I think once maybe, but we
What
don't even see a person
what
get stabbed
one
actually.
time you do see it go through somebody, but noticeably there's no blood on the claws. So somehow the
Yeah,
blades went through the guy without getting any blood on them, which you're like, well, that's just stupid. Don't
right.
even put it in.
Or
If you're going to do that, then don't even give me that shot.
right. Or there's so many shots of like the predator swinging their arm and then we just cut away
Yeah.
in a sudden slash of red.
They really
Uh
go at the alien and predator gore because suddenly you're into like glowing green blood, and that's cool. That's fine. The MPA
But
has no
even
problem
that's
with
sort
that.
of like held back because something that really stood out to me was okay, we have our final shot of the dead predator as he's being lifted up by his fellow predators and taken away in honor. And we see the puncture hole that is left by the alien queen that impaled him with her tail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a smear of green. There's no like puckering hole. So like
Right.
even the predator wounds that we see are so cartoonish as to be just matte colors across their
Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that in here, and it's just
Oh yeah.
it's all the big other thing that the unrated edition has is an alternate opening sequence with the whaling village in 1904. There's an extended
Oh yeah.
sequence, yeah, where you see that. And I
So
have to
in the
imagine
final cut, we just get a single line of, yeah, at the time it was a big mystery.
when really there was, yeah, no, there we got a bunch, and we don't need any of that. I mean, what do you need at all?
The fact that we even include the idea of this like frozen, dead, abandoned whaling village
Yeah.
from 1904 is so needlessly like, well, we really like those shots from John Carpenter's The Thing where they're wandering around an empty,
Yes.
abandoned base.
I mean, but there's moments in this movie that are bordering on legally actionable from John Carter. From
If
John
they had found an
Carpenter.
axe embedded in like a door frame
Yeah,
somewhere.
they came real close to Carpenter being like, "Get my lawyer on the phone." No, I'm sure he's just like, whatever, man. Everybody rips me
No,
off.
and yeah, look,
24/7.
and Carpenter is clearly also aping stuff from the Lovecraft story at the Mountain of Madness, which has
Yeah,
a very like specific Arctic like
and
scene of that as well.
Paul W.S. Anderson also name checked that in one of his frame of reference.
Sure.
And of course, as people point out, The Thing is based on a short story which was also adapted into a movie in the 50s, so even that is not
Yeah.
wholly original. But a lot of the imagery and the way it's shot certainly comes from Carpenter. But it just
Sure.
speaks to, it's not just The Thing. There's so many parts of this movie where you're just like, that's from that movie. That's from that thing. That's from that. And I just sort of, like, I just found myself bored. There was nothing new here aside from like moments, like I said, especially when you're actually getting the alien versus predator fights, which are shockingly few, as we've said. There's moments where I'm going like, that's pretty cool, but then I just
Well,
move on.
especially in the reading, we can see that like they actually did a lot of work to try to use practical effects
They
as
did.
much as possible in
And
this movie, which is admirable. I think there's some
absolutely.
great puppet work happening
Yeah.
here with the alien specifically. I think the alien queen looks great.
Yeah, they talk about that in the trivia. That's clearly where a lot of the money went, because that was like one of the most advanced animatronics ever built for a movie at the time, and it looks great. In fact, that stuff looks so good that when they do go to like the CGI aliens, I think they look like dog shit.
Yeah.
When
Like
they're
there's a couple of scenes, especially in like high speed action, where you see an alien getting kicked off of a predator, and it like for a brief moment when the alien is not touching the ground, it's CG and it really stands out.
Yeah. No, I they put all that in there, but I think also the limited amount of it also speaks to the budget, right? Where you're like, look, we
Totally.
can afford 2 big fight scenes or whatever. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well then that forces me to spend time with the characters who I do not care about and I'm not interested in their story at all.
Yeah, and could we have done this with less characters? Maybe, but then
But then you'd
how
have
do we
less
get the amount of
kills.
aliens we get in this movie? And
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of stuff like that where it's like I can follow the thought process on stuff, but it's not none of it is making a good movie. It's all just problem solving from a production standpoint.
right, and like the original script called for 5 predators, and they cut it down to 3 for
Yeah.
production purposes. And
Yeah, which
yeah,
I mean, there's countless stories of things like that where it's like there was supposed to be an army of rock monsters in Star Trek Five, and then they were like, you can have one rock monster. Shatner's like, well, it looks like shit, so we might as well just have no rock monsters. Like, there's tons of stuff like that where you're always debating on that kind of stuff. But yeah, it makes it tough to watch. So I think the Alien franchise in particular is guilty of this, and that's included here, where everybody wants to make. We've talked about those sequels, like, yeah, let's make Alien 3. What is that? I don't fucking know. And I think that was the case here, too, where they were like, we want to make an Alien versus Predator movie. What is that? I don't know. Because clearly if somebody goes, we should just do the comic, and Fox is like, that seems expensive. Don't do that. And also, I'm sure there's also just, and we know this from being lifelong comic book nerds, the attitude of this time was also like, comics? Ugh.
yeah, unfortunately.
Those are stupid.
Those are for children, I think.
Yeah, so I'm sure also it's just like, we should adapt this comic. Like, it's a comic. That's dumb. But I think one of the big problems here is Paul W.S. Anderson. And whatever, but like,
You have such a hate boner for this guy.
I just don't think he's a good filmmaker. But I think that also because this movie looks like his Resident Evil, I think this movie is really shittily lit. I think the lighting is god awful. He's trying to go for this dark aesthetic, but it's just dark, not like effectively dark. And also the amount of, and some of this is the time period, but it's very much, very, very present in his Resident Evil movies. The needless slow motion shots.
Yeah,
a lot of that.
I mean, you're not wrong about the Resident Evil movies.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is just like coming off of, I think all the movies we've watched have had good directors, and this feels like the first time. And I don't even know who directed Requiem, because I don't think it's anybody. That's a movie with no director. It's crazy. No. It has 2 directors.
The Brothers Strauss.
Yeah, all their classics. But I'm saying, like, even who they're hiring to direct feels like they're cheapening out.
Yeah, and the fact that they're not willing to put the resources or the people behind something that is intended to reinvigorate their franchise, right, speaks to this sort of like half-heartedness that is going to plague all of these franchises until Prometheus, I think.
Yeah, we'll get a brief bright spot, because I know we're both Predators defenders.
Sure. When does Predators come out?
I think that's the first one after these. That was between AVP Requiem and Prometheus.
Right, that's 2010. Yeah. So, because our next few movies are Alien vs. Predator Requiem, then we have Predators, then we have Prometheus.
Yeah.
But even Predators is this, like, reconciling of what we can actually do with this franchise, right? And, like, if not for people like Robert Rodriguez kind of like backing it, I don't know if it necessarily looks as slick as it does.
No, but it definitely is an indication of, because of guys like Rodriguez, somebody's got some passion in there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Look,
I guess
now we've got all the passion in the world right now, but
that's the thing with Paul W.S. Anderson. Whatever, but I don't get the sense he's really like, he's running the ship, but he's a guy for hire. I don't get the sense this guy's really pushing it. And, he may not have been given the resources, but I've seen enough of his films. He's fine, but like I said, he screams B tier to me. I enjoy his Death Race movie to a certain extent, mostly because I love Statham.
Sure.
But I just think, yeah, I think his movies are kind of always lesser than. He's a huge step up from Uwe Boll, who's just a
That's the thing,
disaster.
right? Is like,
Yeah.
I think Paul W.S. Anderson's heart feels like it's in the right place a lot of the time because that's where also the paycheck is. Whereas Uwe Boll, I don't know where his heart is. It's just a void.
I mean, go listen to our Meet the Monsters episodes about like the Blood Rain franchise, and there's a lot of just us going, what is this guy even trying to do? I like, does he think he's doing a good job? I can't tell. I don't know. Well, let's look at some other people's reactions from this in a segment we call Highs and Lows. Oh, I will say a segment on this show that I've just copped doing at this point is what does Roger Ebert think? Ebert didn't even bother to review this one. Ebert didn't see Alien versus Predator. He's like, send the B tier guy, whoever their other film critic was at the Sun Times. He can, yeah. I have to read this one, even though it's kind of long, just because of the use of a word in the title. Okay. So this is our low, because once again, I always kind of start closer to the end we're at. Not that we're necessarily at this. It's been 2 years, and I still can't forgive the unscrupulousness of this piece of shit. That's the title? That's the title. Unscrupulousness. That's a first.
All right.
That's a first we've had in a high and low review. All right.
Uh-huh.
Paul W.S. Anderson, the man who's directed previous travesties as Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil. Now, once again, I would state, at least Mortal Kombat, kind of fun. It's not great, but
if we can have a man with no discernible accent play Raiden the Thunder God, we can do anything, John.
I mean, Lambert is so much of the reason I like that movie. Doesn't fail to live up to the standards, which consist of a horrible script, cheesy, too cool for school directing styles, weak cast, and every other weakness in a film you can think of. The only person who rivals his ineptness is none other than Uwe Boll.
Well, John, did you write this review?
Oh, yeah. This is actually just me. I wrote this last night. He's already ruined other franchises with his previous films. Okay. I don't know if he's ruined franchise. Once again, hyperbolic. And now by directing and writing Alien vs. Predator, he's managed to ruin 2 movie series at the same time. The story of this film is by far the weakest aspect of this derision of a movie. All the previous Alien and Predator films had simple plots with good dialogue. Just simply, there was a monster trying to kill the good guys, and they had to survive it. The stories were so uncomplicated, yet incredibly well written, that the viewer could not possibly complain that the story was bad. Alien vs. Predator, however, attempts to be a big, complex story with deep meaning to it, but it just comes off as being stupid and try-hard. Paul...
Is it? Is it trying to do that?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I agree that the script is dumb. I also, I wouldn't praise every Alien and Predator franchise for having great scripts or every entry in those. There's some good stuff in there, but, we've talked about them. Paul, a complex story is good only if you know how to write. Wow. It's about
I would argue this story's not even that complex. I don't know.
Well, I think it's weirdly both, right? Like it's weirdly... it's an incredibly simple plot, as I said, but there's a bunch of stuff in it. There's a ton of exposition, but very little plot. It's a weird movie in that. So anyway, he goes on to describe the plot, which we already went through. Anyway, okay. Not only is this completely unbelievable, a pyramid in Antarctica? Come on. I'm willing to give it that. But it totally contradicts the previous Alien and Predator movies. In each Alien movie, the point of the film was don't let the aliens get to Earth or they will kill everything. Yet in this movie, it was like, oh, the aliens have been on Earth the entire time and it really wasn't that bad. The previous Predator film, yeah. I mean, I will say the Earth setting is a big problem I do have with this movie. Not for that reason specifically, but it's a weird choice. And the next one is also set on Earth, of course. The previous Predator films are contradicted as well because the Predator are portrayed as creatures who are noble warriors who actually respect humans and will help them if need be, rather than the ruthless merciless hunters who kill for sport and would kill a human just out of spite if you looked at him funny. Back out of the review. Is that what this movie does? I actually think this movie shows that. That they have respect for humans.
I mean, he like specifically like scans Waylon and is like, "Oh, you're dying of cancer."
Yeah.
Or like when they're attacking all the driller guys, they wait until one of them picks up a gun to kill him.
Yeah. By the way, incredibly stupid scene where Lance Henriksen then forces a predator to kill him, basically.
By using a hairspray flamethrower?
Yeah. Yeah, he pulls a Rorschach on a guy. Yeah, having predators help humans build societies contradicts their nature and takes away the mysteriousness and awesomeness of the predator character. I would just, like I said, my point was just, I don't think that makes sense with what we've seen of them. I'm not sure that I would agree with that exact anything. Anyway, like I said, this long review. I'll try to not break out of it as much. But the thing is, even as a standalone film, it's a very weak story. It can be compared to the later Jaws movies where you saw too much of the shark. Both extraterrestrial species are too in your face and have no mystery, leaving them to just look like guys in rubber suits running around punching each other. Human characters have so little character development that often you don't even get to learn their names before they are killed, and so much more makes you feel like the script was made from a tipped-over box of alphabet cereal. It's obvious.
I love that. Like, I tipped over my alphabet cereal. Pyramid, Antarctica, Predator, Alien?
Well,
whoa.
I mean, I think on the commentary, Paul W. S. Anderson said that's how he writes all his films. But
no,
yeah.
Wow, that's inventive, intuitive, and stunning.
First, I buy a box of alphabet cereal. Then, it is obvious that Paul W. S. Anderson doesn't know anything about mapping or geography. Look, moron! I love that he thinks he's talking to Paul Thomas or Paul. Ooh, I just did it there. The fact that there's two Paul Andersons is very weird. Paul W. S. Anderson. The fact that look, moron, there's no such thing as this elusive Sector 14. Things are mapped using latitude and longitude, bearings and such. Secondly, for the female technician to have said on the spot there's nothing in Sector 14 implies that she has memorized the presumably thousands of sectors all over the world and what is in each and every one of them so she can recall instantly off the top of her head that there isn't anything in Sector 14. This is just one example of how cheesy and full of holes the very dialogue is.
No, they explain this. I'm sorry, but no, they actually explain this in the film.
Okay.
Lance Henriksen says one of our satellites that was scanning for mineral deposits in Antarctica picked up this heat signature. They clearly have gridded out Antarctica into sectors to look for mineral deposits.
I will say, look, I am no fan of this movie, but none of that dialogue was a problem I had.
I'm sorry.
I have no issue
when people point out plot holes that don't exist.
Yeah. Because it's just like, there's a lot of things to hit this movie on. The geography of Antarctica is not, or the idea that, I'm sorry, there's a pyramid in Antarctica. Yeah, I'm fine. That's a sci-fi premise. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit at all. I mean, it is clear that a movie this bad was only made for the action, not the story. The thing is, in this whole movie, there are only 2 fight scenes. If you're going to make a movie that has no good script, which is only about the action, put in a decent amount of fighting at least. I do kind of agree with that point. It doesn't really deliver on the badassery either. And the PG-13 rating? Every other Alien Predator film released before this one had an R rating. This film has been dumbed down for kids so much that about 95% of the movie's deaths or other injuries were off-screen. You would see an alien just getting near a guy before the camera would cut away, leaving you thinking, so not only do we have no story, but we have no gore? I want my money back. The line, "You are one ugly motherfucker," which is the trademark line of each other Predator film, had the last word of it not filmed to keep the low rating. Did catch that. That was a similar thing in the PG-13 of that Die Hard. They do cut off "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," which is upsetting.
You ugly mother. Death.
Yeah. Why did they decide to put the F word in earlier when it wasn't necessary, yet cut it out later when it was? If they had just shifted the F word to the ugly mother part, then there could have been just as many F words, yet still keep the trademark line. Valid, but a weird, very specific nitpick. It's a piece of shit movie. The 1,000-word limit has stopped me from going on. 1 out of 10. So I had more. Believe you me, I had more. And I don't think I credited that too. That was, does it say? Little Jimmy 835. Thanks, Little Jimmy.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's hear from somebody who loved this movie. This is here we go. This is classic IMDb defense of a not great movie. Comes to us from I don't like this new IMDb thing where I have to. Oh, there it is. Jim Manchak 6.
What you got, Jimmy?
This is the title of the review, and once again, this could be titled a lot of these. For some reason, everyone hates this, but I love it.
Do you even need to read the body of it, John?
There's not much here. I will say this one is not nearly as long because there is not the essay length praise of this movie that there was of the negative.
This one's not reaching the word limit?
No, not even close. I just like this movie because I saw it when I was younger. And when you're young, you just love any movie. I didn't see any of the Alien or Predator movies before I saw this, and maybe that's why I like it. I like to believe that the general audience, i.e. me, liked the movie, while the diehard Alien and Predator fans hated it. So I started thinking about how they wouldn't like this, and I came up with these conclusions. Number one. These are
excuse me, and welcome to my TED Talk.
Yeah. J Manchak's 3 reasons why he thinks this movie was not liked by fans. The fans were number one, the fans were disappointed by the fact that it was only PG-13, not R. All the previous films were R, so less violence in this, which ain't good. That's what this guy
wrote. Speaking truth.
Yeah. Number 2, there are a lot of scenes where aliens and predators are fighting. It contains more scenes of there aren't a lot of scenes where aliens and predators are fighting. It contains more scenes of humans running away from aliens and predators, and once in a while, the aliens and predators get on each other's nerves. Agreed, actually. Perfectly reasonable review. Number 3, Lance Henriksen was in the film, which basically messes up the continuity of the entire franchise. It's different if it's just a 10-second cameo, but they give him a huge role. Why do I like this film?
Yeah.
Why do I like this film? Because it gives me a great sense of nostalgia. I enjoyed the special effects and thought the plot was great and fun. Plus, it is pretty scary if you're 8. I don't know. Just try the film out. That's all. 10 out of 10 stars. That's the best ending I've ever seen to an IMDb review. But it's like, I don't know. Give it a shot. That's all.
What I really liked about that review, though, and it's like something you can't argue against, is I gave it 10 out of 10 because nostalgia plays a huge factor in my enjoyment of the film. And you're like, fucking, yeah, righteous. Like, I can't argue with that.
And even shows the thought process of, let me put myself in the headspace of somebody, why they might be disappointed. Like, 99% of the internet needs to do that more. Let me imagine what somebody else who's different than me might think about something. You never see that.
But also recognize the reason I connect with a thing is because it was worked into my childhood development.
Always, start with that, like, I may be compromised here. I'm probably not looking at this objectively. But let me kind of look at it.
Literally how I have to address every single Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a lot more hyperbole with Star Wars and negative fandom.
Definitely.
So, like, there's a lot more of it.
No, I mean, certainly how I feel about Marvel stuff. It's a reason why when I do my year-end, which I'll do on here, I'll do a video of my top 10 movies of the year. I always leave off the comic book ones.
Sure.
Because I'm emotionally compromised.
I think my bigger point of probably compromise is Godzilla, right?
Right, yeah.
I'm just an absolute sucker for those movies.
Yeah, it's like everything's going to start at a B grade or whatever, right? Like,
are there giant monsters fighting each other? Well, then you have my ticket money. What more do you want?
Wait, is Batman in this? Then it's got to be pretty good, right? Like, I mean, Batman is in it, so there are even moments in Batman and Robin where I'm like, well, that's a pretty cool shot of Batman.
Yeah. One of the classic blunders of the Sony Spider-Man movies is the fact that Spider-Man's not in it. Immediately removing a letter grade.
Yeah. So you're just like, no, I'm sorry. It's a D from Adam Webb. Didn't see Spider-Man. Hashtag why no Spider-Man. Alien versus Predator. Yeah, I said, I think my thing is just what a massive missed opportunity here.
Yeah. Well, strap in for our second missed opportunity, John, because we're going to take a couple of swings at this bat and
I
completely
think
flail around in it.
that's the thing. I definitely I remember Requiem even less, other than a few moments in it. But I do
Have you
remember.
not rewatched it since like it was out in theaters?
No. I think we might have seen it together, maybe.
I mean, I have a distinct memory of seeing Alien vs Predator Requiem because I made a double feature out of that day.
Oh,
I
then we
was
didn't. Yeah.
back to back. I saw Sweeney Todd and Alien vs Predator Requiem.
Wow, that's a lot of blood for one day.
It was a gory day.
Yeah, it was a bloody day. I would. No, I have not rewatched it since it came out because I did not like it. But I do remember there being a massive overcorrection.
Yeah. Yes.
Like I just remember being
I've
like, yeah, like I said, like
rewatched it since.
okay. Now that I also kind of like the tagline of this one, and I actually think Requiem has a better poster, which is the Earth with the two predator and alien
The two
heads.
symbols. Yeah.
Yeah, are converging on the Earth. But lest we forget, this came out at Christmas time. So the tagline for the second movie is, "This Christmas, there will be no peace on Earth." That's good.
I love
like that.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, in my memory, once again, haven't revisited it, this one is pulpier because it's certainly gorier.
Oh, yeah.
And that tagline is more indicative of the tone I would like. It's like, all right, if you're not going to make something of any real substance, I do think the negative guy did bring up a point. I would say not that this movie is trying to have a point, but AVP is a little too self-serious for me. If you're going to, if you don't actually bring the smarts, don't be this serious.
Well,
I do think Requiem is a little bit more fun.
I'm gonna wait for you to rewatch.
But
this
I think,
movie,
but I
John.
think, but it's still kind of grim dark, right? Like in my memory, I said I haven't seen it in forever, so because why would I?
I would like classify Alien vs Predator Requiem as solidly schlock.
Yes, that's kind of it is sort of the grindhouse one, right?
We'll discuss it next week. It is something else. Yeah. And that something else swings wildly between a movie that is trying to take itself seriously and a movie that is just a fun slasher.
I do distinctly remember it is definitely not a sequel to this movie.
It is insofar as the predalien that like bursts out of the chest of the predator at the end of this film is the central antagonist of AVP Requiem.
Right. Yes. Oh God, I do remember that. That makes no sense.
And the way it lays eggs in people is one of the most disturbing things in this franchise.
All right. I haven't seen it in a long time. So anyway, enjoy that. But if you want to hear more from us in the interim, you can head over to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/punchupent. That's punchupent. There we're doing our related cases series where we're doing films inspired by or ripped off from the Alien and Predator franchise. You decide. So make sure you do that in addition to all the other great bonus content we have on there.
Absolutely. And of course, one of the best ways to support us here at the Punch Up Entertainment Network, besides our Patreon, is by going over to our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/@punchupentertainment. There you can find all of our shows for your best second screen experience on the internet, as well as our YouTube exclusive stuff like Punch Up Plays. And John, I believe you have some new show where you're getting reports on all of the Hallmark movies. What is happening there?
Yeah, I think that'll be done by the time this comes out, but yes,
it's news to me.
Yeah, as of this recording, we are doing the Hallmark report, where my sister and our holiday movie correspondent Kenzie Campbell has been watching. We'll be watching all 47 new Hallmark movies, plus for the first time 2 limited series that they're doing as well this year.
That's too many women coming home to their old flames that they're meeting on Christmas for the first time in 20 years.
If you watch those, and you may be able to watch all of them by the time this is out on our YouTube channel, but I am always surprised when there's a slightly different plot. Like there was a heist one this year, and you're like,
whoa,
that's different. Most of them are the plot you'd expect, but every once in a while you're like, okay, interesting Hallmark.
Is the heist that the woman is experiencing some kind of like trouble with her career and so has to return to a life of crime to reconnect with the people of her past?
No, I think it's a blind date misunderstanding that leads to being pulled into a heist. Of
Like
course.
you do.
And I love all of those movies are like, I have a blind date on Christmas. You're like, yeah, no one has a blind date no one has ever had like, or I also love, my other favorite thing in those is, if you don't show up to this big meeting on Christmas Eve, you're like, no one's having the big meeting on Christmas Eve. That's insane. CEOs don't want to be in the office on Christmas. What are you kidding me?
Yeah. So even if you're listening to this after the holiday season, please go check those out on our YouTube page.
Absolutely.
While you're there, like, comment, subscribe, hit that little bell for notifications every time a new thing drops on the Punch Up Entertainment Network.
Indeed.
It really helps us out over there.
Absolutely. But until next time, the case file is closed.